Hello, everyone. So we're going to make a start. This is the Classical Civilisation Applicants event. My name's Sarah Bell. I'm the head of department for Classical Civilisation, obviously, but also philosophy and religion and ethics. But it's lovely to have you all here. Thank you for giving up some time of your evening to join us. Okay. So, as I said, I'm the head of Classical Civilisation, and we are very privileged this evening to have three lovely upper sixth students with us. So I'm just going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, tell everyone what subjects it is that you're studying and what school you've come from, as well as what your plans are for next year. So we'll start with you, Isabella.
Hi, I'm Isabella. So I currently do classics, product design, and English language and literature as 3 A levels. I went to Carrington Secondary School, and I plan on doing a gap year and then going to university for doing product design. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Isabella. And Arlo, what about you?
Hi, my name's Arlo. I study classics, English literature, and graphics A level. I went to St. Philomena's Catholic High School, and my plans are to study classical studies at university.
An excellent plan, I say. Okay, last but not least, Alex.
Hello, I am Alexander. I used to go to Reigate Secondary School. Subjects I take are classics, digital media, and IT, and I plan to study clinical psychology at university.
That's brilliant, Alex. Thank you. So you can see quite a variety of subjects and quite a variety of future plans. Okay, so what are we going to do today? So I'm going to let you know much more about the course, hopefully give you a bit of a flavour of what classical civilization is like. So I know you all got sent a little worksheet to have a look at. So we'll be discussing the sources that were on there, and also giving you an opportunity to hear from our lovely students and hear their points of view as well. The chat is open, so if you want to put anything on there when we start the discussion about the sources, that would be great. And then there'll be an opportunity at the end to have a more general Q&A about the subject. Okay, so what is classical civilization? Now, one of the things that is so brilliant about classical civilization is that it's completely new for most of our students. And if Arlo, Isabella and Alex, can you just give us a nod if it was completely new for you? Yes. So please don't worry if you think, oh no, everyone else is going to know all about it, because they're not. Another thing that's so brilliant about it is that it's everywhere. So it might seem like it's about the ancient world and ruins like this wonderful temple on this picture, but actually you'll see its influence all over modern life as well. But I suppose what we're studying is the literature of the ancient world, the culture of the ancient world, the beliefs, art and architecture. It also goes into philosophy and drama, and politics. It's sort of never ending. And we cover all of those things in the course. I suppose it's just more focused on a particular area, which is the societies of the ancient Mediterranean. Okay, so what does the course involve? So there's 4 different units in all. The first unit that you will begin with will be the Odyssey. So the Odyssey is an epic poem written 2,700 years ago. It's a Greek myth. It's entrenched in Greek myth. It's about Odysseus, who is an ancient Greek hero, and it's about his journey home after the Trojan War. So you might have heard of the Trojan War. It's an ancient mythical battle that took place supposedly over the beautiful Helen. And Odysseus came up with this idea of the Trojan horse, which is very exciting. And that was how they managed to conquer Troy. I won't give too much away. The story itself that you'll study is about after he leaves Troy and his journeys to get home, and he meets goddesses and he meets 6-headed monsters. And then when he gets home, he's got a whole load of other problems to deal with. And the reason this story is so relevant today is because even though it's fantastical and it's mythical, it's also essentially about a man and about human nature. So it's really fascinating and it's written beautifully. And some of you may know that this July, I think it's the 17th of July, there is a film of the Odyssey that is going to be released. So that'd be a really great thing to go and see. I have no idea what it's going to be like, but I'm feeling positive about it. So that's the text that we study in year 1. And then in year 2, we study another text, which is called the Aeneid. Now, this is a Roman text. So the Odyssey is a Greek text. And the Aeneid is a Roman text. And it's written about Aeneas, who is actually a Trojan. And after Troy burns, all down to Odysseus, he has to flee with his people. And he's got this huge destiny that he doesn't really understand when he goes. But actually, it's a really relevant story because it's all about a refugee, a sort of band of refugees trying to find a new home. And it's all about the difficulties that they encounter, which is all really relevant and familiar to the stories that we see in the news today. So those are the 2 pieces of literature. In the first year, you won't just be doing the Odyssey. You'll also be doing a unit called the Imperial Image, which is all about the beginnings of the Roman Empire. So in the 1st century BC, we have our first Roman emperor who's called Augustus, also Octavian, also Caesar, but we won't get into that yet. And he needed to basically maintain his position of power because before him, it was all a republic, a sort of democratic society. And he found himself in a situation, which we'll talk about more in a bit, where everyone had to like him basically, or otherwise he was going to get assassinated. And so he created this huge propaganda machine, which involved distributing coins all over the empire. You've all already looked at one as part of your preparation. Don't worry, by the way, if you didn't get the worksheet for any reason, it will all become clear later on. But also getting poets to write poems for him. And we also look at other things like a biography that was written of him after he died, his own sort of autobiography. So it's a much more visual unit, and you can see one of the most beautiful monuments of the ancient world that we have on the right-hand side of the screen there, which is the Areopagos, which you can actually go and see in Rome. And this is my top tip for any of you who are thinking of visiting Rome, is you should definitely go to the Areopagos Museum, because nobody will be there. Everywhere else will be packed and it's air conditioned. So that's my top tip. So that's year 1. And then in year 2, alongside the Aeneid, you'll do Greek religion, which is a brilliant topic. And lots of our students love it. And there is a little bit of Greek myth as part of that topic, but it's really a study of who the Greeks worshipped, why they worshipped them, what they believed about them. And we will look at sanctuaries and we'll look at different festivals like the Olympic Games and the Panathenaea. And we'll look at temples and we'll also look at healing cults. On your screen, you'll see open air Greek theatre, which is 2,500 years old. And you wouldn't think, would you, that was in a religious site, but it is. And even more interestingly, it's in a healing sanctuary. And you might think, well, what has the theatre got to do with healing? Well, it has actually quite a lot to do with healing, particularly sort of emotional and mental healing, which may be interest to Alex, who's going to go on to be a clinical psychologist. So yeah, it's a really fascinating topic, and we look at visual sources again, we look at ancient sites, and we look at lots of literature as part of that. So hopefully that gives you quite a good overview of what the course involves. And obviously we do it over 2 years. Each week, half your lessons will be on the literature and half your lessons will be on either Imperial Image or Greek religion. So it's quite varied as well as a topic. Okay, so in terms of assessment, it's 100% exam. So that is obviously something that you'll want to consider as part of your decision making. Is, do you want a course that's 100% exam, or do you want a balance of coursework? The advantage, I suppose, of exams is that you can build up your knowledge and enjoyment of the course, and then you have your chance at the end of 2 years to show what you know. So there's 3 exams that you'll take. The first one is the biggie, the long one, and that's called World of the Hero. That is on the Odyssey and the Aeneid. It's mainly, well, it's completely essay based, short mark, 10-mark essays, 20-mark essays, and then a 30-mark essay. That's 2.5 hours long. And then You will also have an exam in the Imperial Image, and that's shorter, thankfully, an hour and 45. There's some short mark questions there, but the bulk of it is essay based again, and that's the same for Greek religion as well. And you'll notice there a nice picture on the side of our students about to launch themselves from the starting line of the actual first ever Olympic stadium. So hopefully that's clear for you about assessments. It's worth me just pointing out that we give you lots of support in preparation for all that essay writing. So we teach you how to write an essay. We give you lots of strategies in order to help you structure essays. We do lots of practice of writing essays and exam type questions. So the idea is that by the time you get to 2 years later, you'll feel really well prepared and you'll have learned lots of lovely skills as well. Okay, so in terms of lessons per week, I think I've already alluded to this. You will have 4 hours of lessons a week in classics, and then you'll also have 4 hours of lessons in your other subjects as well. So that's split into two 2-hour lessons, which can seem quite a long time to begin with. Yeah, Arlo's nodding. But it's actually, they go really quickly, so it's fine. And then there's also lots of extra support that we can put in place if you need it as well, in terms of things like, we call it directed study. We have plus sessions. So your teachers are there for you every step of the way. And then we also have, very exciting, is trips, which was the one reason actually that I took classics when I was your age, is because there was a trip to Greece, and look at me now. So the last 3 years have included a trip to Greece, a 5-night trip to Greece, a 3-night trip to Rome. We're going to Greece again in a couple of months. I don't know if Isabella, Arlo and Alex, are you coming on? Oh, there's nods, that's good. And then we also have trips and visits here, because we understand that obviously not everyone can afford a trip abroad because everything costs a fortune nowadays. But we also have a trip to the British Museum, which is really important because there's loads of prescribed sources that you can see there. And I would urge you to go and visit the British Museum, perhaps before you start, to get a flavour of it. We've also visited Warwick University in previous years because they run an Ancient Worlds Day. And we also have visiting and virtually visiting speakers. And actually today in our lesson, we also had lecturers from the University of Bristol and the University of Bath who are putting together a sort of AI virtual reality project about an oracle. And so we're working with them to help with their research. So we get involved with lots of universities. Universities get involved with us as well. So hopefully that gives you quite a bit of information. And obviously there's loads of other stuff going on. We run competitions, students enter outside competitions. That's because classics is everywhere, as I have said. Okay, so here's some pictures of some trips. You can see there on the left, I think it's your left, some students outside St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and the Colosseum and that lovely Aropakis Museum. And then on the right-hand side, there is the Parthenon, which is in Athens, which we get to know in a lot of detail, the Olympic starting line, as I said before. And this, the bottom right picture is actually of a Mycenaean palace, which was, well, we think inhabited by Agamemnon, king of the Mycenaeans, who is also a sort of mythical figure. What you will get to know with classics is that nothing is certain. And I think that's why students love it so much, is because we have lots of evidence, but we don't have lots of certain conclusions. So it's up to you to try and work out what you think is going on as well. So yeah, lovely trips. Okay, so what do you have to do well on the course? Well, to do well on the course and succeed, you need to have that grade 5 in English language. That is essential, really, just because of the amount of reading and essay writing that is involved. You don't need any classics qualification at all. But you're right, you need to have sort of demonstrable writing skills. Obviously, you need to have an interest in the ancient Greeks and Romans, and that doesn't necessarily mean you've studied them or you've watched lots of documentaries or read lots of books or anything like that. It might be that you did the Romans when you were in primary school and you absolutely loved it, and then you forgot about it until you saw that you could study this at Reigate College. You do have to enjoy reading. You don't have to be a brilliant reader. You don't have to be a fast reader. We do most of the reading we do outside of lessons, and then we discuss it inside of lessons. But you do need to love a good story because they are very good stories. And then the other thing is a desire really to understand the world we live in. With any sort of history-based subject, it's about trying to understand who we are as people, why we are this way, why things work the way they do, and in fact, a lot of the time, why they don't work. And actually, it's particularly poignant, I think, when we look at Augustus, this sort of dictatorial figure and the propaganda that he put in place. Like, we see that all the time in modern society and modern politics. So it's good to see how it's gone before, often not so well. But yeah, so those are the main things that we're looking for when you start. Okay, so other things we do. We do ancient languages as well, and Arlo, last year you did the ancient Greek course, didn't you? So we actually run that as a timetabled subject, an intermediate certificate in ancient Greek. If it doesn't run as a certificate when you start, we'll definitely be running it as a club. So an opportunity to learn both Latin and ancient Greek in quite a relaxed atmosphere. It's a really good thing to put on a UCAS form or a CV, and also actually useful for not only crosswords, but also for law, horticulture, languages, medicine. If you're doing a modern foreign language as well, you'll find that you really enjoy doing these. So there's lots happening. And actually this year as well, we've also been running a classics club, which has been really well attended. Okay, right. So now we're going to get into our little mini lesson, and it is very mini. That's what I would say. So I'm going to give you a broad overview of the fall of the Roman Republic, which is a massively complex historical period. And don't worry if you don't understand anything. You can always ask in the chat if you want me to clarify any details. Okay, so this is about the conflict between Octavian, who is also Augustus, and Mark Antony. So we've got key figures here. So we've got Octavian, who is the great nephew of Julius Caesar. He's born into a noble family, and he is, when Julius Caesar dies, he's assassinated. He's stabbed basically by a whole group of his friends, politicians in Rome, and he leaves everything in his will, including his name, to Octavian, who is his great nephew, because he doesn't have any other male heirs. And then we have Mark Antony, who is also a Roman nobleman, a great soldier, hugely popular with the people of Rome, and also Julius Caesar's best buddy. He's another key character, more about him in a moment. And we also have Cleopatra, who was the Queen of Egypt, who you've probably heard of. There was recently a Netflix documentary about her. There's loads of podcasts if you want to find out more about her. But she's often portrayed as this sort of seductress, this bad influence. But actually, she was a hugely intelligent woman, and she ran a huge country. Okay, so we've already mentioned about Julius Caesar being assassinated and how his great nephew Octavian, who will later go on to be called Augustus, inherits everything. Mark Antony was sort of expecting that he would inherit everything, so he gets quite upset about that and runs off to Egypt. There's quite a few other things that happen in between, but we're trying to keep it a little bit simple at the moment. And he meets and marries Cleopatra, who used to be with Julius Caesar. Yeah, so he meets and marries her. Oh, and also he meets and marries her while he's still married to Octavian's sister. I'll just leave you a moment to digest that. So Octavian is obviously quite upset about that, as I imagine is his sister. But he's also worried that Mark Antony and Cleopatra are gathering too much power themselves, and that they're going to want to basically move the Roman Empire, or the capital of the Roman Empire, to Alexandria in Egypt. And Octavian doesn't really want that to happen, and neither do the Romans. So he encourages the Senate, the Roman government, to wage war against Mark Antony. And this culminates in a battle called the Battle of Actium, which is off the coast of Greece, even though it's between Rome and Egypt. And Octavian wins this. Well, we say Octavian wins it, but really it's Agrippa, who is his right-hand man, who is the mastermind behind it all. And that happens in 31 BC. And then not long after that, Mark Antony and Cleopatra commit suicide. It's always portrayed, and I think it's portrayed in Shakespeare actually, that they do it at the same time, but actually Mark Antony killed himself, and then Cleopatra thought, how's this going to go? And so she waits about a year and then realizes actually it's not going to go very well. They're going to parade me through Rome as a prisoner of war. And so she also commits suicide. So as that is quite a simplified view of this part of history, but you'll be learning much more about this and all the complexities when you start. Okay, so you all had this coin, which you have in front of you, which dates from about 20 BC to 10 BC. It's very difficult to date coins. We have on the obverse, which is the one with the two heads, we have an image of Augustus and Agrippa. And on the reverse, we have an image of a crocodile. You may not have guessed that that was a crocodile when you were looking at it, and you might be able to spot that there's a palm tree behind it. There's also a wreath. That little circle is a little laurel wreath, and a chain that's going from the laurel wreath there through the palm tree round the crocodile's neck. So yeah, and it's a Jupondius. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask my students to a few questions, and this will give you a really nice impression of what it's like to be in a classics lesson. We often start by saying what you see, and then we go from there. So we start simple, and then we go beyond that. Okay. So Isabella, I'm going to start with you. Why is it interesting that Agrippa is on this coin?
So it's really interesting that Agrippa's on this coin because this is quite rare for coinage that Augustus sort of put throughout the empire because although, like Sarah was saying earlier, he's a great Agrippa's a great general, and he's actually the mastermind behind most of Augustus's successful battles, and they were actually quite close in friendship, but he was never really shown to be sort of the guy behind all the victories, and Augustus sort of claimed that for himself. So this is a kind of a rare moment of, I guess, honesty from Augustus in his propaganda here. So yeah.
Yeah, well done. We hardly ever see Agrippa. We have got lots of sort of busts of Agrippa, so we know what he looks like. But to actually have Augustus sharing a side of a coin with someone is very unusual. Isabella, I'll stay with you. What message is the obverse side of the coin trying to send, do you think?
So I think the inscriptions, so IMP and DivF, they stand for Imperator and Divi Filius. Imperator sort of stands for sort of the military side of Augustus and sort of his leadership in that. And so it's sort of sending the message that like he's victorious here and Agrippa's there to help him. And so they're sort of like, I guess, equals in a way. And then Divi Filius is it means son of a god. And this was part of Augustus's campaign where he promoted himself as the adopted son of Julius Caesar. But when Julius Caesar died, he was turned into a god. There's actually a comic coin about that. But Divi Filius is all about him being the son of deified Julius Caesar. So yeah.
That's brilliant, Isabella. Thank you. Yeah, so lots of, even though it's just quite a simple image, there's loads of different messages on that side of the coin. And then we look at the other side of the coin. That's even more interesting. And Alex, I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the message that is on that side.
Yes, so the letters colon is in reference to a French colony, which shows how far the messages and ideas actually went, getting all the way to France. The crocodile in chains is supposed to represent how Rome had conquered Egypt, and that I think Cleopatra and everything she owned belonged to the Romans.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And what would the audience have been of this coin, do you think?
Well, it's a Dupondius coin, so made out of copper, which meant it would have been very accessible both to the rich and to the poor. And as well as this, the fact that it was in France shows that they were trying to get to this message to anyone they did trading with.
Yeah, that's great. It's really fascinating when you just look at quite a simple object like this, like how much information it can tell us. It doesn't necessarily tell us a huge amount of historical truth, maybe, but it does tell us a lot about the messages that Octavian wanted to get out there. A question that students often ask is how much control Augustus had over this image. Arlo, do you want to expand on that a little bit, please?
I mean, it's quite difficult to know because he would have had a team of image makers that make sure that his image is consistent throughout the empire. And like the fact that he looks the same in all of his coinage is a big indicator of this. And it certainly fits with a lot of other messages that we have about Augustus through other coins and also other visual and material sources.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I mean, the media machine around Augustus is probably not that different to the media machines around celebrities nowadays. I mean, it's all about images, isn't it? You know, whether that's on TikTok or Instagram or on the TV. It's very old-fashioned now, I know. But it's all about that image you want to portray. And in many ways, you could argue that Augustus sort of invented that big propaganda and media machine. Another thing that's quite interesting about this coin is that you might remember that the Battle of Actium, which is what this coin is sort of commemorating, took place in 31 BC. Yet this coin's dated between 20 and 10 BC. So, Isabella, why do you think there is such a discrepancy in the dates? Why do you think it's being minted? What does it tell us?
I mean, it really tells us like how much emphasis Augustus put on the victory of this battle, and having it minted for so long, he's really just like, I guess, showing off the victory because he's trying to just promote the sort of keeping those Roman values over the Egyptian religious and moral values. So, and having victory over that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it shows that he's obviously very proud of this victory and he wants to keep reminding people of it. And the other thing, which I didn't mention, is that Mark Antony, Octavian had a lot of enemies. Mark Antony was the last one to go. So that's a very significant moment in Augustus's career as well. So thank you. Some really good discussions there. And if any of you have got any other questions about this coin or other sources, visual material sources, then please do let me know. Okay, I'm going to move on to the poem now, which is often the trickier of the type of sources that we have. The thing that I say to students about the poems is it's all about looking for the propaganda that's in there. It's not about being able to understand every single word and how it all fits together. You can, obviously, if you love literature, you can appreciate the poetry as literature. But it's also thinking about the portrayal, really, of Octavian, his friends, and his enemies. So this is an extract from a poem by a very famous Roman poet called Horace. And it's called Cleopatra, so clues in the title. And again, hopefully you've had a chance to look at it and pick out some interesting language. So I'm going to read it out and then I will try and explain some things as we go through it. And then we will have a think about what it can tell us about Octavian, Cleopatra, and even Mark Antony. Okay, now's the time for drinking deep, and now's the time to beat the earth with unfettered feet. The time to set out the God's sacred couches, my friends, and prepare a Salian feast. So lots of celebratory language there. We're drinking, we're dancing, we're feasting. It would have been wrong before today to broach the Caecuban wines from out the ancient bins, while a maddened queen was still plotting the capitals and the empire's ruin. So hopefully you notice the change of tone there. Caecuban is just a name of an Italian wine. With her crowd of deeply corrupted creatures, sick with turpitude, she, violent with hope of all kinds, and intoxicated by fortune's favour. But it calmed her frenzy that scarcely a single ship escaped the flames, and Caesar reduced the distracted thoughts bred by mariotic wine to true fear, pursuing her close as she fled from Rome. So mariotic wine is Egyptian wine. Out to capture that deadly monster, bind her as the sparrow hawk follows the gentle dove, or the swift hunter chases the hare over the snowy plains of Thessaly. And sometimes it can just help to read poetry out loud to get more of a gist of the sort of mood and atmosphere that's being created. Okay, so let's think about some very particular things here. So, Alex, can you talk to us a little bit about the portrayal of Cleopatra in this poem, please?
Yes, I mean we can see from this that Cleopatra is shown to be mad and plotting to go against Rome. We can see like with Man Queen was still plotting. It's a pretty direct call out. There's lots of imagery of her drunkenness, intoxicated, which I think suggests like a kind of unconscious violence, that she's dangerous. But interestingly, she's also compared to a hare and a gentle dove, which is quite confusing in the contrast. It's much more sympathetic, a lot more not dangerous. A gentle dove seems safe, so it's quite a confusing contrast.
Yeah, it's a really interesting poem for that reason, and also it brings out something which we have with poetry today, is that it's not always obvious what the poet actually thinks or feels, but it can reflect perhaps the feelings that the Romans had about Cleopatra. Someone is missing in this poem, and that is Mark Antony, who had quite an important role in all of this. Alex, why do you think he's not?
So Augustus very much prided himself on the fact that he ended the civil wars in Rome, and by mentioning Mark Antony, that's kind of admitting that it was their civil war. By not mentioning him, by just talking about Cleopatra, it sounded much more like a foreign war. So by not mentioning Mark Antony, he just removes that. He just removes the civil war aspects of it.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's a really important thing, is Rome had, there'd been civil unrest in Rome for 100 years, really, before the Battle of Actium. And Augustus really needed to portray himself as the one who was bringing an end to it all, who was defeating these foreign enemies. And this poem is a key part in what becomes known as the myth of Actium, portraying it as a foreign war, as you so well said there, Alex. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Cleopatra. We've talked about the absence of Mark Antony. Arlo, can you tell me a little bit about what we learn about how Augustus is portrayed, please?
Augustus, because Cleopatra is betraying as such a threat, like the fact that Augustus was able to defeat her makes him seem stronger, and how he's compared to a sparrowhawk and a swift hunter shows his power and also his ruthlessness, and kind of puts Cleopatra as like the fallen and Augustus as the victor.
Yeah, very good. It's a very sort of victorious, as I said, celebratory poem, but there is that underlying message which is quite interesting to explore, I think. Thank you. Hopefully that's made the poetry seem a little bit less intimidating, or it's whetted your appetite to read more, because we look at quite a few different poems, such as Ovid and Propertius as well. Okay, so a big part of classics is you coming up with your own opinions and your own judgments. So we're just going to go through a few little polls now for you to give your opinion, make it a little bit interactive. So the first one, hopefully it will appear on your screen, is how successful is the portrayal of Augustus as a capable military leader in these sources? And this actually is not dissimilar to a sort of exam question you might have. So if you could all contribute, that would be brilliant. Okay, that's great. No one's saying not successful yet. Oh, and there's some people are changing their minds. Okay, so I think we've got like a 67-33 split between very successful, 67%, and partially successful, 33%. And you know what? You're all absolutely right, because there's no wrong answers in classics. As long as you can defend yourself, that's the main thing. Okay, that's brilliant. Right, let's see what you think about the next question. Okay. Having looked at the evidence, do you think Augustus portrayed the conflict with Mark Antony and Cleopatra as a civil war or a foreign war? Oh, I think I've skipped. No, I think that's my fault. Oh, so I think the question you're looking at now is how successful is the portrayal of Cleopatra as an enemy that needed to be defeated in these sources? So please do answer that. I think it's just that I skipped ahead too much on the screen. So at the moment, we've got 56% say very successful, 44% partially successful. And interestingly, someone has said not successful, which is really interesting. And I think what is important to remember about that is there would have been some people in Rome who probably knew Cleopatra and met Cleopatra and really liked Cleopatra and thought that this was all, absolute nonsense. I don't know whether, is gaslighting the right term? Young people, help me. Is that the right thing to say? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so thank you for your contribution to that. Okay, so I think the third poll is the one that we had is the one on the screen. So having looked at the evidence, do you think Augustus portrayed the conflict with Mark Antony and Cleopatra as a civil war or a foreign war? Okay, that's great. Thank you. Very heavily on the civil war side. Foreign war, sorry. Foreign war. Yeah, although a few of you have said a civil war, which is really interesting. And maybe that is tapping into the fact that people knew exactly what was going on. Okay, yeah, so come out there with 79% foreign war. So thank you for participating. These are the sort of questions that we'll be asking in class, and we have a lot of class discussion because we want to hear our students' opinions, and in the exam it'll be all about being able to put a really good argument across. And so we practice that not only in writing but with lots of talking in class as well. Okay, so more reasons to study classics. Hopefully you're already convinced. Students tend to do really well in the subject. As you can see, for the last 2 years, if you study classics, you're more likely to get an A star, an A, or a B than not. It's pretty much nailed on that you're going to pass. One of the reasons for that is that our students really do love classics, and they fall in love with the subject, perhaps when they didn't think that they might do. And yeah, it sort of does become a lifelong passion, I think. And our students who've left college, they come from diverse backgrounds. They gain places at a range of universities. We regularly have students actually go on to study classics or a related subject at Oxford or Cambridge, but certainly at one of the many universities that offer it as a subject. And there's lots of different variations of it as well. But then we also have students who are going on to study, Isabella, was it graphic design you're going to study? Product design? So yeah, and one year we had a student go off to study equine therapy and zoology, and then there's also English and history. So yeah, don't feel like classics is not for you, because it's a subject that is for everyone, no matter what you're studying. So you will never feel out of place in a classics lesson. Okay, this is another thing that's really important, is people say classics. Well, that happened ages ago. How's that relevant? Well, obviously it's relevant because it's everywhere, as I think that's the third time I've said that now. But it's also going to offer you lots of different skills. And as teachers and staff, we often speak to employers about what skills they're looking for. And these are the things that they are talking about. Communication skills, as I've already talked about, how we do lots of group discussion tasks in class. Writing skills obviously is key. Critical analysis is key to getting a high grade, which lots of our students do. So you're analysing sources like the ones we've looked at today, and you're drawing conclusions from them, or you're trying to draw conclusions from them. And sometimes those sources are really problematic. So you've got to think how you can use them. You'll need to be organised anyway as a student at Reigate College, and other things like reading, research, negotiation, persuasion. It's all in there. So don't worry that you're not going to learn skills that are going to be really, really useful to you in whatever you go on to do. And I always say to students, actually, I always use the example of, whatever job you do, you're probably going to want to ask for a pay rise at some point. And so if you've got those critical analysis skills and those putting together a good argument skills and using evidence to support what you want, then that will be really beneficial for you. Okay, so what can you do to prepare for the course? Well, we've already talked about the Odyssey film being released. I've put it on there under films. You might want to just take a photo of that slide, really. There's loads on there. I mean, I'm not expecting you to do all of these things, or even any of them. And actually, as some of you may know from your interviews, you'll be expected to do what we call new starter activities before you start. They're released after you've finished your GCSEs, don't worry. And they're just little activities. They're not really labour intensive, but just to prepare you for studying each one of your subjects at college. So some of that will involve, and there's definitely a podcast to listen to, I think, and doing a bit of additional research and reading. But if you want to throw yourself into learning more about the ancient world, or if you want to use any of these to help in your decision-making skills, because one of the hardest things about studying at Reigate is narrowing down what you want to do. And it might be that you're here learning about classics, but actually you're torn between doing that and something else. Obviously, you should choose classics, but these might help you. Decide. And I have been through the TV shows to check they're all on the right streaming platform. The Natalie Haynes Stands Up for the Classics podcasts are really good. Yeah, I can see Arlo nodding there. They're only about half an hour. I mean, she is a classicist who's also a comedian. Who knew? And yeah, so there's lots on there that hopefully you can immerse yourself in. Okay, so we are now at Q&A time. So I'd really like your questions, and they might be questions about the sources, they might be questions about classics, or even actually if you've just got questions about college and what it's like, then it would be really good for our students to be able to answer them. So I'm just going to give you a moment to put in the questions that you want. Okay, so I've got one here which is about it being a new subject. So was it very hard starting a new subject? So I'm going to start, I think, with Arlo. What would you answer?
I'd say that I think less so being difficult to start a new subject, it's just different. And I feel like with classics as well, it kind of is a mixture of existing, like if you've done history or English literature, it's kind of a hybrid of those. I'd say it's a challenge, but I don't say like I didn't struggle with it myself. And I do think that when I started, it was very like the staff were very helpful with learning and stuff. So I feel like it can be difficult, but I think it's not stupidly difficult.
Okay. That's reassuring to hear. I might just direct that question to Isabella as well.
I mean, for me, when I was first starting it, I mean, really the biggest thing for me was this is a completely new subject to me, but I I think if you really do do seem interested in it and you really want to get into it and you enjoy reading, like if you enjoy the main aspects of what they offer in classics, then I think it will be easier. And I like, especially as time goes on, like at this point, I think compared to when I started, there's a lot more confidence, definitely. And like they really give you lots of support in terms of like answering the questions and how to structure them. So there wasn't a bunch of concern when I first started. So yeah.
That's great. That's good to hear. Alex, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
I was gonna say what Arlo said earlier about having a lot of other aspects of other subjects, even though it is different. I think there's a lot you can take from other subjects to like that you will understand. Of course, English and history, religion, RE, even if some more obscure ones that not everyone's doing, like philosophy. We do, you learn a bit of that. There's a lot of other subject elements that can be found in classics. So I feel like even if it is different, you can already have, bits of understanding from what you've already learned, even if you haven't done classics.
That's great. That's really helpful, Alex. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions here, which are for me to answer, really. So what books of the Odyssey do we study? So it's more which books of the Odyssey don't we study? So we don't study books 2, 3, and 4, which is the story of Telemachus, if that means anything to you. And then there is 2 or 3 books in the latter half, the Ithacan books, that we don't study either. And then the next question is, what is the average price of the trips abroad? So the Greece trip this year is, I think, somewhere between £1,000 and £1,500. And I know it's a lot. But yeah, that's all I could say, really. Okay, so a question for the students here. Which of the sections of the classics course do you find most engaging? So let's start with you this time, Alex.
For me, what I find the most engaging is definitely the two epics we do, the Aeneid and the Odyssey. I quite enjoy reading, but they're both very iconic pieces. And I think especially with the Odyssey, you can really see how like early storytelling kind of like is you can see like in modern day how they all take from these earlier versions of stories, and they're really fascinating and iconic and rememberable. I could probably there's sort of like a bunch of different details in the story of the Odyssey like at any moment because it's so rememberable and iconic.
Oh, that's really lovely to hear, Alex. Thank you. And Arlo, what do you think?
When I started the course, I was the most excited to study the books because I'm an avid reader. But I actually found like the other two like units, like Imperial Image and Greek Religion, even more engaging because of the fact they're just so different. And I didn't really know much about Imperial Image, but like after seeing the booklet, I was just definitely enamored by it. And I think that that's like the fun of it because you do get the reading side, but then you also get to study all these coins, especially in the lower sixth. We did a lot about like Suetonius, which is the one who wrote about his life, who wasn't Augustus. But yeah, he's quite funny because he has a lot of scandal and it is quite fun to read about that. There's just something different and it's like a lot more media of all sources and stuff.
That's great. And Isabella?
Yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree with both Arlo and Alex. I mean, I really love reading, so definitely the epics part of it. And like Alex has said, I mean, it's really like easy to follow along with, especially the Odyssey. With the Aeneid, it's obviously a different style and different audience, but it's still really engaging, and it's just interesting to read about sort of where they get ideas from and origins for like how the world came to be, really, in a way of like societies, but also just yeah, learning about all this new material. I mean, it can be daunting, but at the same time it's like all this like a fresh perspective on something you've never seen before and being able to connect it to all of these different classical things. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Isabella. Someone's asked if I've studied classics previously at GCSE, will being familiar with the sources give me an advantage? Well, that's a tricky question. I mean, I suppose inevitably, if you come into the subject with a little bit of background knowledge, then it does, I suppose it gives you a bit of an advantage. It certainly won't give you an advantage in the final exam. But yeah, I suppose it means you'll be coming into it being sort of quite comfortable with the sort of language that we use. But what I would say is it's very much pitched at a sort of starter level. But hopefully you've enjoyed Classics GCSE and you'll come along and study it with us. Okay, as part of the learning, is there essay writing? Is there essay writing homework? Well, I would. Okay, Arlo's shaking their heads. There isn't really. I mean, with the uppers now, we certainly encourage our students to write more essays that we can look at. But the essays that you do write are all done in class. And actually, I think there's a question later on about how much essay writing and practice we do. So every half term, you'll have an assessment. Your very first one will be a short mark question, a 10-mark question. But after that, it will all be essay questions. And so sort of every 5 or 6 weeks, you're writing an essay in class. And then within 2 weeks, you'll have that essay back. You'll have a lesson, which is general feedback, one-to-one feedback. You'll set your what we call feedback and actions, but you might know them as targets. So yeah, you'll be really well practiced. I might just ask you, Alex, how do you feel about the essay writing? Do you feel like we do enough? Too much? Is it just right?
I think it's a reasonable amount. Going back from the half terms and having a key assessment. I mean, at this point we have had a go at writing all the essays. We've done a couple 30 markers, we've done 20 markers. You get to the point where like you know how to do the structure, you know how to write them. So I think we do them enough where you understand how to write them, and obviously you get plenty of feedback for when we do try them, and I think there's enough time in between for you to actually really think about the feedback.
Excellent, thank you. Arlo, could you just talk a little bit about how Classics balances with your other A levels? Someone's asked, how much essay writing and practice do you do throughout the course? We've talked a bit about that. How does it balance with your other A levels?
I'd say that it just kind of depends on what kind of subject you do. From my perspective, I also do a creative subject, and I would say it's sometimes hard to balance the amount of coursework you get from a creative coursework with essay writing subjects. But I will say that for me, classics I don't really struggle that much to balance it with graphics. It's just more that it can take some adjusting, but there's always additional support. There's facilities in the college that you can go to do your work. So it kind of just depends on what subject you do and how well you can kind of like manage time. And time management is something to struggle with. I definitely struggle with it, but if you put in the effort and like stick to structured learning and homework, I think it will be less hard.
Thank you. Arlo, did you say you do English literature as well? So we've had a question about how the essays done in classics compare with subjects like English literature. Would you mind just talking a little bit about that, please?
So in terms of English literature, it is quite different because in English literature, there's a lot more components you need to write about in an essay, like linking specifically to deep analysis. And like in some of the other essays that we do, we have to link to other critics and stuff, which we do in classics 30 markers, but not necessarily in 10 markers. So in English, we don't have any like short answer questions. It's all like at least 30 or 40 marks. So it is very different. But when we study some of the poetry and also the 2 epic texts, they do come in handy if you want to study English literature as well, because there is some kind of interconnection. And also in English, there is a lot of classical allusions in texts as well. But in terms of the actual essay writing, I'd say it's quite different, even though I'd say classics easier to write, but that's just my opinion because of how in-depth English literature needs you to go. But I feel like it's not too much of the same, and I think they're quite ranged anyway.
Thank you. That's great. And what students often say is they find that lots of different subjects have different ways of writing essays, and that takes a bit of getting used to. Another one of our attendees has asked if students feel really rushed when they're writing the exams. Isabella, I might just ask you what you think about that.
I think for me, I think with just timing and exams in general, it takes lots of practice and lots of just going back over the feedback and sort of finding a way to pace yourself that works for you. And also, if you feel like if you've had it before or you feel like you need it, you can go to Support Hub to ask about having extra time and things like that. And so there is support in place where if you get to the point where you feel like you're not prepared enough in terms of the timing, then they can get you the help that you need. So hopefully when it comes to the exam time, you won't feel too rushed in the exam. So yeah.
Thank you. I mean, that's why we give students lots of practice of writing exams because it is time pressured by its very nature. So yeah, but we do give you lots of practice and encourage you to practice yourself as well. Okay, so there's a question here of how much Greek mythology do we cover? Alex, I might just ask you what you feel about that one because my answer might be different to yours.
In terms of Greek mythology, obviously in the second year we do Greek religion where you learn about obviously what they believed in the mythology there, but also in the first year with the Odyssey. The Odyssey is obviously a very long myth, and there's a lot of different ranges of fantastical and mythological elements in it, with a lot of different gods that are involved in it, and also not just gods, but like monsters like Scylla. So I think definitely if you love Greek mythology, you'll like Greek religion, but also there's a lot of that in the Odyssey, learning different, seeing all the different mythology, and I think that's a really enjoyable element of it.
Great, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, because one thing we're always careful of is to sort of tell students it's not a Greek mythology A-level, but it does touch upon it, sort of all cultural aspects. Someone else has asked what would we learn about outside of ancient Roman and Greek culture? Well, it's very much an ancient Roman and Greek culture course, but it covers so many aspects of, as I said, the Mediterranean. So we're thinking North Africa, we're talking about Gaul, Spain, Persia. We talk about the Persians a little bit with different aspects of it, particularly the sort of Greek representation of them and how they were viewed in Greek culture. But we also have this classics club that we started this year, which is very much sort of student led. So if there's, I mean, I think they had a Green Man party a couple of weeks ago. So it's very much led by an interest in sort of history and different cultures. Okay, would studying Latin at GCSE be an advantage when it comes to Latin and ancient Greek? Actually, I would say it's too much of an advantage because we are starting really basic with the Latin, sort of not, never having studied it before. So unfortunately, we don't offer Latin A-level here. But if you have done Latin GCSE, you would be so welcome to come along to Latin Club because what ends up happening is everyone's at a different level. So I have certainly got books and texts that are at Latin A-level that you could come along and enjoy, and obviously the Greek would be great. Okay, the last question then. Do you learn about Roman festivals along with Greek festivals? We do a little bit in the Imperial Image unit, which is a really, the Roman festivals actually are really interesting, and they're referred to a lot in the poetry. In fact, I think you saw the Salian feast being referred to in that Cleopatra poem. But one thing we are very lucky with in the classics department is we've got a huge library where you can borrow books whenever you want. So yeah, I can definitely direct you to some Roman festivals. Okay, so I think we're at the end now, aren't we? Thank you so much to the students. You're amazing. And thank you so much to all of you future students. You're also amazing. The very last thing I have to say is that there will be a survey that will be emailed out. Well, it will pop up on the screen, sorry. It will pop up on the screen. Please fill it out because it's really useful for us to make sure that we can improve it as much as possible. And also a recording of this webinar will be sent out as well. But thank you so much for giving up your evening, and I really hope that I will see all of your faces in a few months' time. So bye, thank you.